The wind was brisk that morning, the kind that carried the scent of earth freshly turned and the sweet, faint aroma of hay from the barns behind my house. My little farm stand sat at the edge of the property, a humble wooden shack with baskets of eggs, jars of honey, and a few crates of vegetables from my garden. I'd been running it for years, and in all that time, it had never caused trouble until Karen moved in 3 months ago. She didn't live in the HOA neighborhood across the road, but she chaired its board like it was a seat in Congress. From the first week, she made it her mission to improve the area, which seemed to mean removing anything that didn't fit her rigid picture of perfection. She'd already bullied the local bookstore into repainting their sign and had threatened the bait shop for displaying unsightly fishing nets outside. But I wasn't prepared for her to come after me. It started with her Lexus rolling up to the stand, not to buy eggs, but to block the driveway entirely. She stepped out in a wide-brimmed hat, sunglasses, and that pinched expression like the world owed her an apology. "This is an eyesore," she announced loudly, as if the bees buzzing nearby might need to hear it too. I told her the stand was fully permitted, licensed with the county, and had been here longer than she'd lived in town. Her response? She waved a printed sheet in my Facian HOA ordinance that, she claimed, prohibited unlicensed commercial activity within visual proximity of HOA property. I laughed, partly because my land wasn't HOA property and partly because the absurdity of policing what someone saw from a car was too much. She didn't laugh back. 2 days later, I woke to find a red, shut-down notice stapled to my stand. No official seal, no county letterhead, just a printed threat signed, HOA enforcement. The paper was fluttering in the wind like a warning flag. She had even called the sheriff's office to report me. The deputy who came out was a local, knew my stand, and left shaking his head. That should have been the end of it, but for Karen it was just the beginning. She returned the next weekend with 2 HOA board members in tow, marching up like they were seizing a criminal warehouse. They started snapping pictures, muttering about fines, and even tried to take a crate of eggs as evidence. That was when I decided I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I called the county agriculture office, sent them the so-called ordinance, and invited them out for coffee. The head of the office, who happened to be an old friend of my dad's, was outraged enough to involve the State Department of Agriculture. A quiet plan began to take shape. The following Saturday, I restocked my stand brighter and fuller than ever, placed a chalkboard sign out front with a big arrow pointing toward it, and made sure word got around that fresh eggs were going fast. By mid-morning, a few cars had stopped, and among them was a black SUV with government plates. I recognized the man stepping out immediately, the governor himself, here for a surprise visit to promote local farming. Karen didn't know yet. She was too busy storming up in her usual fashion, HOA goons behind her, shouting about illegal sales and property values. I stayed quiet, letting her rant, until the governor walked up behind her. She froze mid-sentence when she heard his voice. "Ma'am, is there a reason you're trying to shut down one of our state-certified farm stands?" Her skin went pale like milk left out in the sun. I could see her mouth open and close, struggling for words that wouldn't incriminate her. The governor turned to me, shaking my hand warmly, and asked how business was. I told him truthfully that it had been better before the harassment. He promised, loudly enough for the gathering crowd to hear, that no one HOA or otherwise would threaten small farmers on his watch. The crowd's reaction was a slow ripple of applause that grew into full-on cheering. Cameras clicked, phones recorded, and Karen stood there, shrinking with each passing second. She tried to claim she was just ensuring safety standards, but the governor cut her off. "I've seen enough. You'll be hearing from the state's legal office if this continues." And then, to twist the knife, he bought 3 dozen eggs on the spot, holding them high for the cameras like a trophy. Karen's retreat was quiet but awkward, her heels clicking against the gravel as if she wanted to vanish into the ground. The board members who'd flanked her moments before suddenly found other places to be. That day, my sales tripled, the video of the incident went viral, and I started getting calls from neighboring counties inviting me to set up stands at their farmers' markets. Karen, meanwhile, found herself facing public complaints to the HOA about overreach and embarrassment to the community. If you were standing there that day, you'd have seen more than just eggs and honey on a tablet. You'd have seen a line drawn in the dirt, and someone finally standing up to the kind of entitlement that poisons small towns. And the best part? I didn't need to raise my voice once. The truth and a little help from the right person did all the talking. The next morning, I thought maybe Karen would simmer down after being humiliated in front of half the county and the governor himself, but apparently, I had underestimated just how deep her spite ran. By dawn, I was pulling crates of eggs from the coop when I noticed my stand's chalkboard sign was gone. Not blown over gone. The wood post was snapped clean at the base, like someone had stomped it deliberately. And on my little countertop, where I usually laid out the honey jars, there was a single, cracked egg oozing in the early sunlight, yolk pooling into a sticky mess. I knew it was her. A lesser person might have cleaned it up and gone about their day, but I'd learned something during my years working the land. You don't just harvest vegetables, you harvest patience. And when the right season comes, you plant back exactly what the soil will return to you. This time, my crop was going to be truth and proof. That afternoon, I installed 2 motion-activated cameras, one facing the stand, one hidden in the hedgerow across the road. I left the new chalkboard sign out, freshly painted with fresh eggs, fresh justice, in bright yellow letters, and a smaller one below that read, "Smile, you're on camera." A few regulars chuckled when they saw it, but I wasn't joking. Sure enough, the very next evening, a figure in a floppy hat and oversized sunglasses crept up to the stand, glancing around like she was in a bad spy movie. The cameras caught her pulling my honey jars into a tote bag, yanking the flowers out of the vases, and then flipping over the crate of cucumbers like a petulant child. She left as quickly as she came, but not before muttering something about ruining the neighborhood. I didn't even have to take the footage to the sheriff. I sent it directly to the governor's office, with a polite note. "Thought you should know, the harassment continues. I've stayed civil, but this has gone too far." The reply came faster than I expected. 2 days later, the county agricultural inspector arrived not just to check the stand, but to deliver a formal notice to Karen's HOA that any interference with a licensed farm stand was a direct violation of state commerce law. The sheriff's deputy followed with a separate warning about theft and vandalism. Word traveled fast, and by nightfall, the whole town knew Karen wasn't just concerned about aesthetics. She was now under official watch. Still, she didn't back down. In fact, she doubled her efforts, organizing a petition to have the farm stand moved out of sight of their community. The petition got maybe 6 signatures, 3 of them her own aliases, and even then, the county clerk filed it directly into the trash. But in her head, she was still the hero of this story, fighting the good fight against my so-called egg shack. The breaking point came 1 week later. I was bagging up a dozen eggs for a little girl who came with her grandmother every Saturday when Karen rolled up again. She didn't bother getting out this time, just sat in her Lexus, windows down, blasting her voice like a siren. "This isn't over. You think you can hide behind your friends in government, but I'll find a way to shut you down." The grandmother's face tightened, her arm instinctively wrapping around the girl's shoulders. I stepped forward, not shouting, just loud enough to be heard. "Karen, you're embarrassing yourself. Go home." She drove off in a cloud of gravel dust, but it was too late. The moment had been caught on 3 different cell phones. By the time I locked up the stand, the clips were already circulating online with captions like, "Local HOA president loses it at farmer," and "Egg carton showdown." That night, the twist came from an unexpected place. My neighbor, Old Man Clancy, stopped by with something wrapped in newspaper. When I unwrapped it, I found an original deed signed in 1914 showing my property line extending a good 15 feet beyond the roadside. That meant not only was my stand legal, it wasn't even as close to their so-called HOA sightline as I thought. Clancy just smiled and said, "Figured you might want this before she tries anything else." It felt like finding an extra ace up my sleeve in the middle of a poker game. With that document, the county doubled down. They issued Karen a cease and desist order for harassment and trespassing threats, warning her that any further interference could lead to civil penalties. Her own board members began distancing themselves, some even apologizing to me privately. It was like watching a ship captain insist the iceberg wasn't there while the rest of the crew jumped ship. The final straw and the sweetest moment came 3 weeks later at the County Harvest Festival. I had my booth set up, selling eggs, honey, and jars of pickled okra. A familiar black SUV pulled in, and the governor stepped out again, this time with his wife. They shook my hand, bought a basket of eggs, and thanked me for being a model of resilience. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes, and then someone whispered that Karen had just arrived. She froze on the edge of the crowd when she saw the governor holding one of my cartons for a photo op. People were pointing, some laughing, others shaking their heads. She tried to slip away unnoticed, but the local paper's photographer was quicker, snapping a picture of her half-turned, red-faced, caught between leaving and pretending she was supposed to be there. The next morning, that photo was front-page news under the headline, "Egg on her face." After that, she vanished from public view for a while. Word is, she stepped down as HOA president for personal reasons. My stand? It's still running, now with a bigger sign and more customers than I ever dreamed. Sometimes folks stop by just to take a selfie where the showdown happened. I never sought revenge, not really. I just wanted peace. But sometimes peace comes only after you stand your ground, document the truth, and let the world see the difference between spite and justice. And if a few extra egg sales come from it, well, that's just good farming. So what about you? Would you have kept your cool? Or would you have served Karen her just desserts right from the start?